Hello friends, welcome to UPSC Logics, and in this video we shall have a look at the Kigali Agreement. So the Kigali Agreement was held in Kigali, Rwanda on October 15, 2016, and in this was in regards to curbing down the HCF emissions from different countries, and this is related to the environment and sustainable development, so the topic becomes important. So without wasting any time, let's have a look what the Kigali Agreement was. So let us have a look at what this agreement is all about. 197 countries that are party to the Montreal Protocol took part in it, and the target was to reduce emissions of the greenhouse gases and the hydrofluorocarbons. So this particular agreement is a legally binding agreement and will come into force from January 1st, 2019. So what is this agreement all about? It is about reducing the global warming by 0.5 degrees by the end of the 21st century. So there has been a study conducted by the Institute of Governance and Sustainable Development that says that the temperature of Earth shall increase by 0.5 degrees due to HFCs, and the countries have signed this particular protocol for the elimination of HFCs so they can actually reduce or control this particular temperature rise because of the HFCs. And under this agreement, the developed countries will reduce their HFCs by 10%, and this they will do by 2019. So whatever levels they had in 2011-13, they shall reduce that level by 10% and shall reduce 85% of the 2011-13 emissions by 2036. So let us have a look at what India's commitment or India's role is. So Kigali makes history with HFC freeze. So this was the headline when this particular protocol was signed, and India was among the 197 nations to phase out the family of greenhouse gases within various timelines. So let us have a look at the article. Countries came into an agreement in Kigali on Saturday to phase out the family of potent greenhouse gases by the late 2040s and move to prevent a potential 0.5 degrees Celsius rise in global temperature by the end of the century. So it says the same thing of what I told you earlier, that the global temperature is set to rise by 0.5 degrees, and this particular move is to prevent this potential rise. Then the article talks about the hydrofluorocarbons, what it is, and it says that it is a family of greenhouse gases that are largely used in refrigerants in homes and car air conditioners. And it is said that these are currently the world's fastest growing greenhouse gases, and the emissions are going up by 10% each year. And they are extremely powerful gases, and they trap more heat than what carbon dioxide does. In fact, it traps 14,800 times more heat than the equivalent amount of carbon dioxide. So what is HFC 23, which is being released into the atmosphere? It is a byproduct of producing the refrigerant HCFC 22, which is popularly known as R22, and it is being used in home refrigeration and car air conditioners. So what happened in Kigali? 198 countries agreed to phase out gases like HFC 23, and these are just one of the 19 HFC gases that are being scheduled to be wiped out by 2040s. So what is India's plan? Let us have a look at this also. So the baseline year that has been set is 24-26, which means that India will have to start working on it from the end of 24-26 and not 11-13. So has been a different plan for the developing nations, and let us have a look at that. Let us have a look at what the plan for the developing countries is. So India, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq and Gulf states, these are the countries which are developing nations, and a separate plan has been made for these countries. So the process of reducing emissions shall begin from the year 2028 for these countries. So by 2032, they'll just have to reduce 10% emissions, and as I told earlier that the baseline year has been set as 24-26, so they'll have to reduce just 10% of what their HFC emissions are in 24-26 by the year 2032. Then moving on, they'll have to reach a level of 85% by 2045. So they'll have to reduce 85% emissions to the 2024-26 level, and this is the plan for the developing nations against the developed nations, where the timeline has been set to 2019 and the baseline year has been set at 2011 2013. So they'll have to reduce 10% by 2019 and then 85% by 2036. So what it means for India: India's participation in a global agreement on climate change will reduce India's greenhouse gases equal to closing 1/6 of India's thermal power stations over the next 35 years. And India will reduce 75% of its cumulative HFC emissions between 2015 and 2050 under the new agreement finalized in Rwanda. So India has already started working towards reduction in HFC emissions. In fact, they have passed an order where the government has asked all the producers to shelve the HFC 23, which is a byproduct of HCFC 22, and therefore they have already started working towards reduction in the HFC forte, and it is being said that by 2050 it will reduce 75% of its cumulative HFC emissions. The new agreement is being called an ambitious plan. Now we know that the baseline for the developing nations has been set to 2024-26, and this means that for the group of countries which are included in the developing nations such as India, Pakistan, Iran and Iraq, the plan becomes more ambitious than the previous Indian proposal and less intensive than the North American proposal. So what India had proposed earlier was a plan for developing countries to freeze HFC consumption by 2031. Now this means that the deadline for the freeze has been preponed, and therefore this plan becomes more ambitious for the developing nations in comparison to what India had proposed. Similarly, North America had suggested that the developing countries should freeze HFC production and consumption by 2021. So in this case, this particular deadline has been postponed, so it becomes less intensive than the North American proposal. And in fact, India had proposed earlier that the developing countries should freeze their HFC consumption by 2031, which meant that these countries would continue using HFCs till the year 2031, and then slowly they would decrease over the years. In fact, an earlier freeze and an earlier baseline years, that means that India would be actually mitigating more carbon dioxide equivalent than what it had originally proposed by saying that the developed countries should freeze HFC consumption by 2031. So it is said that under the new agreement, India will freeze the HFC consumptions and use by 2028, and it will phase out the HFCs by 2047, which means that it will bring it down to 15% of the average use of the HFCs that it was using in 24-26, which is the baseline for the developing nations. And it will cost India around $16.48 billion, which equates to 1.1 lakh crore of rupees. And another group of developing countries, which include China, they have agreed to freeze HFC consumption even before that by 2024. And they are saying that by 2045, they'll reduce the HFCs by 80% of the average consumption between 2020 and 2022. So for China, the baseline year is 2020 and 2022. The developed countries, as we have discussed earlier, will stick to what was originally proposed, And United States and Western European countries have agreed to freeze HFC consumption and use by 2019, and by 2036 they'll phase down the HFCs to 15% of the average use of consumption between 2011 and 2013, which was the baseline for the developed nations as proposed. And the Indian government has also passed an order on October 13, 2016 for all producers to destroy HFC 23, a gas with global warming potential 12,500 times more than that of CO2. And this has been stated in the United Nations Environmental Programme. So this will result in eliminating emissions of 100 million tons of CO2 equivalent in India over the next 15 years. So this is going to be a big achievement for the nation. And in fact, if you have observed that a lot of air conditions are now coming with green gas technologies, so that is the replacement for the HFC 23. So friends, the Kigali agreement has been done for a simple reason: to prevent the rise of the earth temperature, which is supposed to increase by 0.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the 21st century. In fact, the main reason that has been said is that it is because of the use of HFC gases that the air temperature is going to increase by the 0.5 degrees Celsius temperature. And we all know that HFCs are used in air conditioners and refrigerators. And since the demand for these particular instruments is always on the rise, so it is being said by 2050, 5.4% of the global warming impact would be contributed by India. And in fact, the HFC emissions in the world are expected to grow by 10 to 15% by 2050, and this could contribute to 200 billion tons of CO2 equivalent emissions. So it becomes imperative that the use of HFCs is curbed down or totally banned to prevent the 0.5 degrees Celsius rise. So that's why this particular environmental pact becomes extremely important. So guys, this brings us to the end of the Kigali agreement. I hope you have enjoyed this video and understood the concept why this particular agreement is important and why it needs to be signed. And thank you so much for watching. If you are a new subscriber, do like and subscribe to this channel. In case you are an old subscriber, don't forget to press the bell icon. And thank you so much for watching, and Jai Hind.